All right, so what I'm gonna do now too is I'm also gonna back out and just make sure that everybody has access to the slides here. So I'll put the bit.ly link in.
Hey, get out.
Copy that. All right, guys, check the chat. Here are our slides for today. All right, see a bunch of people popping in, so it looks like it worked. All right, so just for some quick background, again, my name is Tom Driscoll. I work for EdTechTeacher. We provide professional development services to schools around the world, and we're also partnering with DESE to provide these Google for Education workshops. We have a whole series of them. I'll explain a couple of those that are coming up. If you joined a couple of our past sessions, thank you for doing that. We'll have all of these recorded and shared in our archive as well. Prior to this, I was a high school social studies teacher in 2 different school districts in Connecticut. And as I was there, some of my background in the flipped learning classroom was when it first came out, actually, it was probably maybe like 2011 or so. It's kind of when the idea really first started to come out. And I was trying to search for other social studies teachers that flipped their class, and there really weren't a whole lot at that point. But the few that I did, it was a really nice community of teachers from around the country that were just starting to explore the idea of using instructional video, but also creating your own, right? So what are some ways that we can create engaging videos, that we can make them into really nuanced lessons? This past year also really thrust a lot of people into the concept of flipped learning just by default, right? So a lot of our instruction had to be through instructional video of some sort, whether it was something that was curated online or if it was something that you created yourself, right? Which brings us to today's session. So moving forward, even though we are getting back to some sort of normalcy in our classes, I still think there's a lot of space for instructional video to remain prevalent and to become kind of like a core instructional strategy for us. So what I'm going to do is just kind of start with an overview of the session. This was from the description. But the idea is that, the flipped model, it enables us to take what would have been, a whole class direct instruction and shift some of that. So it's more asynchronous. It's students can engage with that in a little bit more of their own time, their own space, which frees up time to do more interactive, innovative classes. So before we get too deep into the nuts and bolts of it, I just want to ask you guys, so there's a lot of different definitions and variations of what the flipped classroom has been called or flipped learning has been termed. So I'm just going to open it up to you. We don't need everybody to jump in, but in the chat, if you had to summarize, what is a flipped classroom? What does that mean to you? What is flipped learning? How would you describe it? So I'll give you guys about a minute or so right in the chat. What is flipped learning? All right, thank you, Chrissy. Definitely more student driven. Excellent. So take a second, if you have a chance, read through some of the responses in the chat. A lot of really interesting takes on this. Just to summarize what I see here, there seems to be a pretty good spectrum. And this is why I asked that question, because I think it does mean different things to different people. Some people think it's, focused primarily on homework. That could be part of it, but that's one of the misconceptions that I want to address today. Flipped classrooms doesn't necessarily mean they watch a video for homework, right? There's a lot of ways that you can leverage that instructional video. And I saw a lot of people say it's a little bit more student driven. It's engaging for students. It gives them the ability to be more interactive in class. And I also saw a quote from John Bergman. So Julia mentioned the learning in the collaborative space, the individual space. So John and Aaron Sams, those were the 2 guys that really got flipped learning going, probably around 2010. And I had the opportunity to work with both of them pretty closely. And that was John's big thing, was that it wasn't necessarily about the video. It was what the video then enabled you to do in class when you were with them, when you could collaborate with them, right? So I think that that's an important piece of this, is that the video itself is a way to redesign your class, to redesign the experience for kids. And for me, just my own personal experience, it just enabled me to do more with the class time, right? I was able to do more projects. I was able to do things like 20 time and Genius Hour. I was able to do some PBL work. So what it did is it kind of removed a lot of that whole group, lecture that I used to do a lot, and shifted it more towards that individual space where they engage with the video on their own. The other things, and I see Julia mentioned that too, about the different types of flipped lessons. It doesn't just have to be a video either. Like, I know a lot of people that do like audio recordings, they do simulations, they assign games. Like, for instance, iCivics, if you're a civics teacher, you could flip a lesson by saying, hey, we're going to explore, the Bill of Rights through a game or simulation through the iCivics, where that's kind of like where they learn some of the content, and then you have more of a class discussion or something else you do with that collective time. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an overview of where we're at as far as flipped learning. In essence, it's taking some of that, what would have been direct instruction, and shifting it to some type of digital format where they can experience it at their own pace, and then you can redesign your class from there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is actually go through at the beginning the types of content you can create. Now, most of the examples I use are video based, but again, it doesn't have to be. Those are just the styles that I'm going to choose to share. The other thing I'm going to do is share with you some of the go-to Google for Education tools, that are Google Workspace for Education tools, that you can use and harness to help flip your class. Some of these are baked right into Google, but some of them are also extensions that you can add to your Chrome browser that make it a little bit easier to create videos, but also to facilitate a flipped learning environment. I'm also going to open up to you guys at the end, where if you have any go-to apps that I don't mention, I'm going to mention a ton of them in this deck, but if there are any other ones that you really like to use, let's use this as a collaborative space to share out some ideas as well. Then at the very end, I'm not sure if we have too much time at the end of it, but if we do, I'm also going to share some tips on, like, if you really want to make some high quality video, what are some tips on doing that? What's some equipment you can get? And what are some little hacks you can do to your space to make it better? Because trust me, I've been through it. Like, when I first started making videos, they did not come out great at the beginning. The technology's come a long way in the past 10 years, which helps, but there are just some real quick practical things that you can do to make your videos a lot better. All right, so let's dive right in here. So the first thing is I shared a link in the slide deck. I believe it's still active. Let me just double check that. But what I did is the last few years, I've been running similar workshops to this quite a bit. And I've been asking folks, like, what are your favorite instructional video channels, right? So let me just add that here. Yep, so perfect. It's still here. So here are some ones that I have come across that are some teacher created channels, but also just some really good instructional video channels on YouTube. Because for a lot of the strategies I share, don't feel like you have to make every video from scratch. There's a lot of great content out there. For instance, Veritasium is one of my favorites. It's a science channel. It does a lot of inquiry hook videos. So if you want to make a flipped lesson around some of these science videos, go for it, right? So I think that's part of this too, is being flexible with some of the content that's already out there, as well as making your own. So that's just a quick list of things that I've come across that people have also shared along the way. All right, so back to this. Okay, so the first thing is the idea of why creating your own videos. So as I just mentioned, there are a lot of great ones out there, but I think there is a lot of value to making at least some of them yourself. And I'm sure a lot of you guys on the call have done this before. If you have any takeaways or reasons why you like to make some of your own, or why your kids like your own, add that to the chat. For me, it came down to two different things. The first is that a lot of the stock videos that were out there for my flipped class didn't always match up with the specific course I was running, right? So maybe the content didn't align directly or just the kids' interests or needs were different from the ones that were available. The second thing is that you're their teacher, right? There's that social part of this where when they see you providing a lesson, even if it's not as perfect or quite as engaging as some of the professional content that's out there, it's you. And that means a lot, right? So kids like to see when they have their teacher actually instructing them, even if it's in a digital format. So those are the two ones for me. Again, if you guys have any other ideas, feel free to jump into the chat and share them. But those are the two main reasons why I think creating at least some of your own videos makes a lot of sense. So the first thing I'm going to do is go through what's called, what I call the instructional purpose of your videos, right? So if you're going to flip your class and you're going to make a video, or even if it's some other type of digital content, there's a few different ways you can look at this, right? And when I started, a lot of it was a lot of direct instruction, right? So things that I would have done, say, a lecture on in class, I flipped into a video, right? So for each one of these, I provide an example. This is just one from, actually from a while, I think it's like 2013 or so. But what I did is I created a slide deck. Within the slide deck, I went through and created a screencast video, which a lot of people, it's kind of like normal now to do that. And then I would always have one or two students kind of like be guest stars in the videos, right? So I went through it, very straightforward, kept it to about 5 minutes. And I did this for a lot of my lectures throughout the course. So that's where I started, and that's where a lot of teachers do, just that direct instruction, that class lecture that turns into, or a content-based lecture that turns into an instructional video. Math teachers also did a lot of direct instruction. This is my buddy Kyle Wilson. He's a teacher in Rhode Island, elementary math, and he did a ton of instructional videos where he just modeled some type of content that was in his math curriculum, and he kept it pretty simple too, right? So he just had his kind of whiteboarding tool. He would go through, he would kind of talk through the different examples and then create a group of instructional videos for his students. So that's where I started. And probably my first year of flipping my class, I kind of stuck with the content-based approach. Like I have some content, I'll flip it, I'll turn it into a video. So the other way that you can think about it too, and this is a high school example, if you guys want to check out one of those, is, and this is actually where it was probably my second or third year flipping, and I was juggling a lot of stuff, and I was really running short on time. And I was teaching a civics course for the first time, and me and my colleague were like, all right, we want to flip our class, but we're crunched for time. We don't have a lot of time to do this. So this was our strategy, and it actually worked out pretty well. At the end of each unit, we would make a review video. We would actually sit during our prep period, crank out like a 25-minute video, and we would use that for a review. But the nice part of this is we then took that review video and we chopped it up into pieces. And we took each review video and chopped it up into like 5-minute chunks. So then the next year, we could then use this throughout the unit as part of a flipped class. We didn't just use it as a review video. So that's a way, especially if you're first starting to flip your class and getting into it, using something as simple as Google Slides, a built-in screencasting tool, make a review video, and then in the future, you can kind of modify and chunk it out a bit. The other thing I did, which I think was helpful for students, and I even did it like on this slide deck here so you can see, if you look at that bottom row, like you see how I have the topics here? That was actually a suggestion from some of the students, because as they were going through the video, they kind of wanted to see what specific topic I was talking about at each point, especially if they were going across that timeline. So think of it's kind of like a table of contents type thing. Having those visuals is really helpful because they may not need to watch that whole video. Maybe there's just one topic. So say they're watching this video, like, you know what? I know what a sovereign state is, but I have no idea what civic virtue is. They could just go across that timeline until that's kind of lit up. It's easier than you'd think to do too. All I did was create a series of text boxes at the bottom of my slide deck. I changed the fill color. And then as each topic changed, I would just kind of paste it on the bottom and then change it. It was a little bit of upfront work at the beginning, but once you have the template, you just make a copy of your template and slides and you're good to go. And you don't have to use that specific style, but that would be one major suggestion that I have to use that. When you make instructional videos, you make any type of flipped content, you have very clear visuals on the topic or the subtopic you're talking about, because it's just going to make it a lot easier for navigation purposes. All right. Oh, and actually, bonus points to anyone who can kind of guess who I stole the color scheme from. So in the chat, what show, here's a hint, it's on ESPN, did I steal that color scheme from? All right. Next, modeling skills. This was something that I was like, why didn't I do this before? But if you're in a class, especially if you have some core skills or competencies that you work on throughout the year, sometimes that may be the first video you make, right? So what's the thing that you have to teach and reteach over and over again, or keep coming back to some of those spiraling skills, because you're going to get the most bang for your buck out of that flipped content, right? So if I make, for instance, a World War II video, I'll use it during my World War II unit. But for instance, this is a video I made on primary versus secondary sources. I realized kids literally had no idea what the difference was when they were coming into my class. And we were doing a lot of research projects, and they had 0 primary sources in any of their research papers. So what I started to do is I would share out videos like this that taught a skill. And then for every project, right, I might do a quick check of understanding. If they still didn't get it, I would have them review this video before they launched into the project. So whether you teach math, science, ELA, social, whatever subject you're in, you may want to think about what are those skills that kids still have consistent trouble with, make a skill video. And then here's the other nice thing, we could share across departments and we could share across classes. So the English teacher in my school at that time, we both realized too, they had a hard time developing a thesis statement, defending their positions, things like that. So they made some of their videos. And not only did it save some time, but it helped us align our teaching. Because one thing I realized is that I was actually teaching, teaching and defending a position. Someone trying to jump in? All right, can't quite hear the audio on that. So if you have a question, maybe jump into the chat. But anyway, so that's something that helps us align some of our teachings. What I was saying is I was teaching it slightly different than the English department. So being able to align some of those skills and strategy videos was really helpful. All right, so next up, oh, Justin, you're the big winner. It was Pardon the Interruption. Ding, ding, ding. All right, next, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but tech tutorials. A lot of times, different companies have their own built-in tech tutorials. I created this one when Kahoot first came out. It was like a new tool back in whenever the heck I made this, 2014, 2015. But I just made a quick guide to how to use it, just get up and running. Sometimes, again, bang for the buck. If you use a tool all the time and you want to introduce kids to it, especially younger kids, so I'm sure I have some elementary folks on the call here, just a quick video walkthrough of how to use the tools is really helpful, especially if you're like a tech coordinator or a tech director. Like, you guys know, like every district set up slightly different as far as how to access things, how to log in. Some districts have Clever, some are using iPads. How do you log into Clever through an iPad? Some of the stuff gets really tricky, especially for younger kids. So quick tech tutorials of how to walk through getting into platforms, how to sign in is helpful. And as we witnessed last year, a lot of times families need to come in and step in and help. And a lot of the families have no idea how to use any of this stuff. So a quick tech tutorial also helps them support their own kids. So think about creating some tech tutorials as well. Now, this next one's interesting. I didn't make a ton of these myself, but I know a lot of teachers that have, and especially science teachers, but they're called inquiry hook videos. And like Veritasium, that science channel I showed you, is really, really good at doing inquiry hooks. But you don't need content that's specific to your class necessarily, right? So actually, one person who introduced me to this concept was, his name is Greg Schwambeck, I believe. I believe he was a science teacher, but he showed me a video, I think it was a math lesson, where it was a construction site and these guys just threw a rock into a hole and it hit like 10 seconds later. And I was like, how the heck's that an instructional video? And he said, well, the math teacher started class with that, math or science, and the assignment was to calculate how long it took or how deep the hole was based on how long it took. And I wouldn't have any idea how to figure that out, but apparently the class did. But that's what I mean by that idea of that inquiry hook. So here's a quick example of one that's not necessarily an instructional video, but that could be used for one.
Yes, it's crazy. Just dropping it with no spin or anything like that. And as you could see, the ball was sort of doing swaying, so it wasn't going directly straight. It was pretty hard to predict for its response. That's really cool. look at that go.
Right, so just think for a second how you could use this as an inquiry hook video, right? So you can say, all right, what happened? Like, why did that ball take off down the ravine? Because he put backspin on it, right? So for all the science teachers out there, if you know why, maybe share in the chat, 'cause I have no idea. But that would be something that you could use as like an inquiry hook video to get kids interested and engaged. And it was actually John Bergman that said this to me way back. It's when Flip Learning came out, and he said, you know, a boring lecture in class turned into a boring lecture on video didn't really change the game. It just kind of shifted where the boring lecture was. So thinking about how do you make like these little interesting inquiry hooks part of your videos or just part of your lesson is a really, really helpful strategy. All right, so this one, this next concept of creating a video to address misconceptions. And this came up in my class a couple times where every year it was kind of the same idea. But I'm not going to show this whole video, but it's linked into the deck here. Veritasium, again, like you would go around and ask people like, where do trees get their mass? And some of the people are like, oh, it just sucks up the goodness from the soil and the soil goes into the tree. And then he's like, well, wouldn't there be a giant hole around the tree? So there's like a way that you can actually hit those misconceptions head on, create an instructional video, and then hopefully it just reduces that time that you're going to have to reteach that concept once that comes up in your class. And then this next one, you probably did it a bit last year just out of necessity, but assignment instructions I actually found really helpful. So for instance, there's a specific formatting of an assignment. I actually made an assignment video on how to watch instructional videos. It sounds kind of silly, but just strategies for them to kind of lock in, to focus. What should you be doing during your video? How do you take notes on it? So thinking about assignment instructions is another way. And that's also one that you're not going to find some stock video that teaches kids how to do an assignment specific to your class. A lot of times just making your own quickly is really helpful. All right, so now like those are all different types of videos you can make. And the reason why I spent a good amount of time on that is because there's a lot of variety that you can use and there's a lot of different approaches. And also, as someone said earlier in the chat, each one of those things doesn't have to be a video. Like it could be an inquiry hook, it could be addressing a misconception, but it can do it through audio, you can do it through a simulation, you can do it through a game, you can do it through a whole bunch of different things. But those are some of the purposes of that digital content that you would create to then flip your class. So some preparation tips. I learned this the hard way at the beginning. Don't make a 20-minute video. They're not going to watch it, right? So you got to keep it short and to the point. And if it's a longer video that you have to make, so say you're teaching like an AP class in high school, and there's a lot of content you got to get through, split it into segments. And the tip on that is you can still record the whole thing at once just to save you time, but then go and edit it and split it out. So that's a little bit easier. Second thing, as I mentioned before, use as many visual cues as possible, especially for younger kids. And then don't overload your slides with text. I actually had an AP European history resource that went with our textbook, and it had a series of PowerPoints that came with it, and they were utterly useless. They basically just took the chapter and pasted it into slides. That's not going to be helpful for anybody. So if you have stuff like that, just try to modify it, break it down, add some visuals in there, and then do some more explaining as you go through your video. All right, so if you wanted to see like an example of that slide deck that I built out, I did put a link in here. If you want to just go in and make a copy of it, modify it, you can kind of see what I did as far as like the design of it, and then also as far as the color coding and the shading. So again, if this is something that you're interested in, feel free to take this, modify it, change it up. But this is just it was my way of showing kids like the different parts of the video and what I was talking about at each time. The other thing you'll notice is I left a big space here. That was another thing I screwed up when I first started, is I would put stuff all over my Google Slides and my face would be in the way and they wouldn't be able to see stuff. So always have that space kind of built in if you're creating a resource like this. If you wanted to do the picture-in-picture overlay, you don't have to. A lot of teachers make videos without the picture-in-picture, but if it is something that you want to do, just make sure you leave a space for it. All right. So now I'm going to get into the logistics of making your video. So you have the idea, you kind of prepared, you have your slide deck, your things ready. How do you record this? Now, there's a lot of tools out there that make screencasting very, very simple right now. Again, when I first started this in like 2011, I had this Dell laptop, and I'm not kidding, it would take 3 hours to render a 10-minute video. Now you can render a video in like a minute, right? So the ease of creating videos now is so much better than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. The one tool that I see most often used, I'm sure a lot of you guys have used this one called Screencastify. So if you are just getting started and you just want a simple tool that works right within the Chrome browser, I highly suggest Screencastify. That's one that a lot of districts are using, and it's very easy to go in and make yourself an instructional video. The other thing you can do, and the workflow is a little bit different now depending on your license and the new version of Meet, and actually Meet's getting a pretty big overhaul pretty soon, and some of the features have started to roll out already in the spring. But you could actually use Google Meet to make an instructional video. You could use Zoom to make an instructional video. And in the school district that I was in last year in Bristol Warren down in Rhode Island, one of the first things that we started to do was like, all right, you can actually launch a Google Meet or a Zoom, share your screen kind of like I'm doing right now, record it, and essentially that turns into an instructional video, right? So that's a way that you can kind of do it without even needing to screencast necessarily. You could just use the video communication tool that you use for your school, whether it's Zoom or Google Meet, and create it that way. So that's another option as far as recording your instructional video. Now, I'm sure some folks here are also in schools that have iPads. If you have an iPad, iPads are actually really nice to record videos with, primarily because of the touch, and you can annotate and do a lot of stuff that even on like a Chromebook, it's a little bit more difficult. If you have an iPad, there's actually a built-in screencasting tool, and the link I put in there shows you how to access it. It's actually pretty simple. It's built right into the operating system. So if you ever want to make a quick screencast with an iPad, very doable. And then also one of the tips is that you can even do picture-in-picture, believe it or not, but by just opening the camera app, going split screen, and then having like that front-facing camera on. So I've even seen some teachers do some really interesting picture-in-picture video, even using an iPad. So that's another option if you guys are in iPad school. All right, so now the question is, all right, well, maybe it's not just a slide deck that I'm showing. Like if you're a math teacher or science teacher, a lot of times you may want to annotate, right? So a few different ways to do that. There are whiteboarding apps and tools out there. The one that actually is taking off is Google's Jamboard. Now, a little backstory on Jamboard. It was actually so some of your districts may have them. They're actually a physical whiteboard. So it's a Jamboard. It's kind of like a smart board, and the Jamboard software goes with it. Well, what Google did is it's part of Workspace for Education. Anybody can create a Jamboard. So if you haven't used that before, it's kind of a mashup between Google Drive and Google Slides, and it has more features built in if you wanted to do like live annotation or even collaborative annotation. So that's a tool that you could do where if you want to whiteboard while you're screencasting. Another one is called a web whiteboard, AWW. It's just a free online tool, basic, but it gets the job done. I know some teachers that use that pretty effectively. Now, two tools that are more on the premium side of things, that would be Show Me, which I believe is still iPad only, and Explain Everything, which is iPad and Chrome. Explain Everything is high quality screencasting. There is a cost to it, but that has just about anything you would need in a screencasting tool. All right, so I'm going to take a pause for a second. So those were kind of my recommendations for the screencasts and the annotation. I'm going to turn it over to you guys, though. Are there any screencast tools that you use that aren't listed that you recommend? And are there any whiteboarding apps that you use that I did not yet recommend? And just throw those into the chat. I'll give you guys about a minute to add that in there. All right, thank you guys. A lot of votes for Loom. I would say right behind Screencastify, Loom's probably the second most popular screencasting tool. It seems like they've changed their business model a little bit. I'm not sure if it's changed the user experience at all for you guys. If it has, let us know, but that's another really good option. Whiteboard.chat and whiteboard.fi. Actually, I haven't heard of the whiteboard.chat, but whiteboard.fi I've definitely heard of. So check those out if you're interested. Anita, yes, you'll be jamming and rocking out with Screencastify. So basically what will happen is you launch a Screencastify or a Loom, you have your Jamboard open, and then as you go in and annotate in your Jamboard, it would record everything that's on your screen. Or if other people are also in there adding things, you can do that as well. Laura, great suggestion. Desmos. Actually, that's going to come up in a slide or two. If you use like Desmos or Equatio or one of those tools for math, screencasting that is a really nice way to make math videos. Excellent recommendation. Also, any questions? I asked for recommendations, but if there are any questions, feel free to throw those into the chat as well before I move on to that next topic. Okay, so moving on. Speaking of Desmos, so these are the two big ones for math. Desmos, really powerful graphing tool, and Equatio. Same idea of you would do your screencast recording and use one of these tools. Last time I checked, Equatio is still completely free for teachers. I believe it's a paid product for students, however, so that's something you'd have to think about. But if you're a teacher and you want to make instructional videos using some of these math tools, Equatio, excuse me, is one of the top ones out there, if not the top one as far as doing math, writing, syntax. It does handwriting recognition. It even does speech to text. So a really powerful tool if you're a math teacher and you want to make some instructional videos. All right, so the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is I've been talking all about screencasts, but I've seen a lot of teachers do pretty amazing things just using the camera, right? So you could use your Chromebook, you could use an iPad, you could use your phone even, and just make a live video. Oh, Equatio has chemistry? I didn't realize that, Elizabeth, thank you. Jen, good point too. So I didn't put a document on here, but anything that has a video feed. So as I mentioned, Chromebook, iPad, phone, document camera facing down, or even at your board. I know a lot of teachers would actually just do whiteboarding and have the dot cam facing them. All of those are great options too. And sometimes I think those are even better sometimes, especially if you're using manipulatives, if you're doing like a science experiment, or if you're demonstrating something, or you're like playing a musical instrument. All of those things tend to be better with just a live video. So don't feel like everything has to be a screencast. Think about how you could leverage live video as well. All right, so Julia, excellent. Thanks for the comment there. So Equatio is free, Google Read and Write free. For us, it's paid for kids, but you guys can use Read and Write as well. I believe Read and Write has a record option too, so another thing that you guys can take a look at. If you're trying to capture live feeds on a Chromebook, right? So a couple different options here. What I actually suggest is there's actually a website called 123 Apps. And you could use the built-in camera tool, but if you're ever in a pinch and you need something, this is a really simple website that has some tools that you don't need to log in and make an account for. So basically you can go in and these are all different video tools that you can use. Frankly, all you need to do is you do the video recorder tool, and essentially that just records some video, you get the quick file, and then you're good to go. So that's another recommendation. I'll put that in the chat here, just in case anybody wants to check that out. But the built-in camera should suffice for most, but if you need a quick, easy web tool for doing that, that is there as well. All right, so if you wanted to take things up a notch and you wanted to create a little bit more powerful videos, I would actually say on a Chromebook, the best one I've seen out there is WeVideo, right? Because that has a lot of creation tools. I know they've partnered with Google, so you can actually get a package where you can purchase it with your school subscription. There is a free version of it though, so I don't know exactly what it caps you at. Maybe it's 5 minutes or so. But as I mentioned before, that might be all you need anyway. Like sometimes you don't need to present for more than 5 minutes at a time, so that's an option. Another option too is if you're on an iPad. So the built-in iMovie actually has a lot of new features now. It has green screen built in. TouchCast is another really powerful iPad app, but I would still suggest like WeVideo on the Chromebook, and then either the built-in iMovie or TouchCast on an iPad if you want to make some higher quality live videos. So I've also seen teachers do some incredible hacks of how to create their own versions of like document cameras and stations. So If you need to capture live video, such as reading through a passage of a book or annotating an activity, document cameras are a great option. You can see here to the left, a lot of teachers use their phones or iPads and put them on one of those wireframe organizer shelf things, because as long as the camera can see through at least something on that shelf, it essentially turns into its own iPad stand. If you want to get something a little bit more professional, so say some of you guys want to get things for your department, or if you're a library media specialist or a tech director, I've tried a lot of different models, and this company has what I think is the best attachments and stands to try to attach like phones and iPads. So this is the website. This is the one that I have. It's pretty straightforward. It just takes your iPad or your phone and attaches it to any existing tripod. So you don't need any special tripod. It attaches just through that same little screw at the top. So again, if this is something that you're going to make a lot of videos, or if you want to share something through a school, those are some things to check out, and I highly recommend that product. All right, so just some tips on the live video part. And again, I made this mistake a couple times too. I don't know why the text is so huge on this. One second. So first, use more energy than you think, right? My first few, and it was, my kids were infants at the time. I was trying not to talk too loud and things like. If you don't act as if you were like in front of a whole class, it's going to come off kind of dull. So you really have to talk loud, try to have a lot of energy, and then also have your personality in it. So if you make jokes and you have humor in class, use those in your live videos, in your screencasts, because again, that's going to make it human. That's going to make it more you. If you screw up, keep going. I think one of the big barriers to teachers creating a lot of flipped content is, a lot of us are kind of type A, like we want things to be really perfect, especially if we're putting ourselves out there on video. Trust me, it doesn't have to be. Your kids aren't going to care if you slip up on a thing here or there. And frankly, it makes you seem more human if everything's not completely perfect. It's completely fine. Just for the video quality purposes though, one really simple hack as far as the lighting, you don't need to get expensive lighting equipment, but just face the light source. I've seen so many people make flipped videos where like the window's behind them, or there's like a big light behind them, and then their whole face is like a shadow. All you have to do is turn your desk around or turn your computer around, just face your window. That simple thing makes it a lot easier for them to see you. And then from an editing standpoint, say you really do kind of slip up or mess something up. I learned this early on. Keep that thing rolling, keep recording, because it's easier to go back in and edit clips out than to constantly keep starting, stopping, and redoing things. So one tip too that I learned, it was actually part of a video production class I was teaching in the high school, is before you start, you just clap loud. And what will happen is in your video editor, you'll see like a quick spike in the audio. And in a way, that's kind of like a cue for you, like, all right, that's where I'm going to cut and start like a new segment. So again, if you're just doing a quick screencast, you don't need to do that. But again, if you're creating a higher quality one where you're in a video editor and you're trying to splice things together, just a quick clap can actually go a long way in making it easier. All right, so speaking of editing, how do you actually edit an instructional video? So one of those 1, 2, 3 apps that I was referencing, they have a tool in there called Video Cutter, right? So that's actually a really simple way if you just want to cut out a section of a video. If you want to do more editing, the ones that I recommend, again, if you're on an Apple product, iMovie is the way to go. But two other ones that you could look into, one of them is Camtasia Studio. That's the one that I personally prefer. That's like the top-notch screencasting tool that I see teachers use. That was actually the recommendation to me when I first started reaching out to Aaron Sands and John Bergman when this first started. They started using Camtasia right from the beginning. TechSmith actually sponsored a lot of the flipped learning workshops that they ran. So this is, if your school can get a license to it, you can share it with the department. This is a really, really powerful tool for screencasting. Another one that's out there that I've seen some teachers using is Adobe Rush. Adobe, it's like a free version of their Premiere software, but it's a little slightly modified. I'm not sure if anybody's tried that before, but that's another option if you want to do some web-based video editing. All right, so that's just a quick tip. So I'm going to pause again. Are there any other video creation or editing tools that you use that you recommend that we have not covered so far? So again, I'm going to pause for about a minute. Let me know if you have any recommendations, or if there's any that I mentioned that you are like, yes, this is great, I'm going to keep using it. All right, so moving on, the last part here has to do with the actual sharing of it, the workflow. We're not going to spend too much time on this because I'm sure you guys have a workflow already. I just created a YouTube channel. I just thought it was easy to just post my videos there and share it out, make a playlist, and then you're good to go. So like, for instance, if you click on this playlist here, all of my civics and government videos were just in one spot. And every year I just kind of refer back to this. If kids needed to review, they could just go through, and I tried to make it by topic. But this is also what I mean by splitting it into segments, right? So this is the full version of my video. It's 22 minutes long. But then within that, I split it into all of these subtopics, right? So again, thinking about how you'd want to organize and display, it's up to you, but that's just the route that I took. If you want to just keep it in Google Classroom or keep it in your other LMS, that's fine too. It's just the ease of use is really important. The easiest way is usually the best. All right, so back to the chat. I did see a few recommendations come in. Looks like Julie is a fan of Camtasia as well. Another shout out to them. WeVideo for Stephanie. QuickTime, excellent tool for a Mac. Adobe Spark. Spark, oh man, I should have referenced that one. Spark's a great tool if you just need to make a quick video with voiceovers or just splice a few things together. Really good idea. Adobe Premiere is a great product. Justin, a quick mention of Flipgrid. It's hard to go through any workshop without mentioning Flipgrid because it's so versatile. Flipgrid is another simple way if you just want to go in, make a quick video, and then I don't know if you guys have checked out the new camera features, but it is really powerful now. You can do screen casting with Flipgrid. You can do some minor editing, not full editing, but you can edit your video a little bit more. So if you already use Flipgrid and you're comfortable with it, I would suggest considering using that for some of your instructional content as well. All right, so the last part is, how do you make this flipped lesson not just, kids watch a video, how do you make it more interactive? The simplest way to do it is through the notes, just a note-taking document. I kept it really simple. I would just have a standard template. I would modify a little bit for each video. You could do something where you have a simple thinking routine that they do every time, but having them do something during the video is really important. If you wanted to tag it to an assessment, you could post your video somewhere and then have a Google form, or post your video right in your Google form. Two ways to do that. If you have it on YouTube, it's really easy. You literally just add your video from YouTube into the form. If it's somewhere else, my tip is that make a description section in your Google form and paste the link. So say you just have your video in Google Drive, or say it's a Flipgrid link. You put that link right into the form, say, hey, click this link to view, then complete the form. Really simple, streamlined way to make a quick interactive assessment with them. Flipgrid, that's another way that you can have students respond to a video. So you could post your video as like the resource. I'm sure you guys have seen, well, if you've used Flipgrid before, there's that resource you can add to each grid that you create. You make your video there or add your video there, and then they have to create their own video responses within the grid. That's really helpful too for, like, let's face it, sometimes Google Forms don't lend themselves that well to all types of assessments, where a lot of it's still kind of like text-based or multiple choice. I know a lot of you are on there probably like, oh, there's a ton of different answer choices. I know, but a lot of times if you want them to actually explain something, or say play something, or some type of performance task, doing it through video a lot of times is better. So Flipgrid's another good way that they can create and share their own videos back with you. Now, this tool is probably the most widely used in education to make your videos more interactive. I'm sure a lot of you guys have tried this before, where what I like about EdPuzzle is that not only can you trim up existing videos or make it add quiz things to it, but you can add your own audio points. So this is where you can kind of do a merge of the two different concepts. So I talked about either making your own or finding existing content. EdPuzzle, you could find an existing video and still add your own overlay audio on top of it, giving kids points or sharing ideas or just kind of clarifying things. That's, I think, one of the more underutilized features of EdPuzzle is that ability for teachers to add audio points into the videos. So if you haven't used EdPuzzle, check it out. I know that is a freemium product. There is some, I think there's some type of cap on the number of EdPuzzles you can make, but frankly, if you get to a certain point and you run out of space, just delete your old ones and create some new ones. That's kind of a workaround with a lot of these tools. All right, so two more that I wanted to show you quickly. There's actually an extension. It's mostly worked for me. I have had a couple hiccups with it, so if you have to, just let me know. But it's called Record to Slides. This is an extension where you can literally record a video and have it pop right into your Google Slides. So think of this as another little hack to make an instructional video, right? So you can give out a slide deck, but instead of screencasting this whole slide deck and make it into a video, maybe you just want to add a little audio or a little video explaining something that's coming up in the slide, or say you're doing a hyperdoc and there's a lot of assignments kind of baked into it. This is just a really simple way to add your own instructional video to a Google slide. If you've tried this before, maybe let us know in the chat. Let me know how it's gone. But if you haven't, it's definitely worth a try because it could certainly streamline the process for making instructional videos where you can just add right to the slides. The other one that is super popular right now, getting a lot of traction, is called Moat. And Moat is a way that you can add audio points to literally anything. But where I see it happen a lot is, say, for instance, again, you're making a Google slideshow. You share out your deck with kids, but you can tag it with audio points, right? So you can have instructions or clarifying ideas or whatever it might be, and you can add that right to your Google Classroom, or you can add it right to your Google Slides. So I think maybe it was Jen at the beginning mentioned that flipping doesn't necessarily always have to be video. You could consider these audio points as well as a way to flip your class using Moat. All right, so I'm also interested too, if anybody's used Moat before in the chat, maybe let me know, and perhaps how you've used it in your class. All right, so last thing, we do have a few minutes before we finish up. I do want to share some of the more higher quality video tips and equipment. So say, for instance, you get the hang of it, you start making videos, you want to take things to the next level a little bit. I'm just going to share some of the equipment and things that I've used to help make some more polished instructional videos. So one thing that we start to do at EdTechTeacher is create video courses. So we use a platform called Teachable. Let me actually go to one right now just to show you guys what it looks like. And for this course on gamification and game-based learning, what I did is I went through and I created a series of like higher quality videos as part of the course. So you can see here, I'm actually at my desk that I'm at right now. But one thing that I did was the green screen feature, which is built into a lot of these tools. You can do one of two things. You can buy a green screen, or what I actually did right here. So this is a wall. I just painted it green. And there's green screen paint, but you actually don't need to get green screen paint. You could actually just get like the color code for green screen and get like Bear paint, and then just get that code. So if you have a space in your school, maybe it's the library, maybe it's the curriculum, whatever it is, I would invest in a bucket of paint, make a green screen wall, and then you don't have to worry about lugging green screens everywhere. So that's one tip. Second tip is audio. A lot of folks have some issues with audio. First thing is, if you're in a room that doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, you guys may have run into this before, you get a lot of echo. So there's a couple ways to address audio issues. First is to actually have things in your room, but that's not always an option. So if you're looking for a quick, simple way to do that, they actually have these things that you can get from Amazon, and they're really, really cheap. I think this whole package was like, I don't know, $5, but it's this little foam stuff, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen anything like this, but what happens is you put this in like on a wall, like say, for instance, you want to add this up on a wall somewhere, or you can make I've even seen teachers make like a big box, and they'll put this foam behind their computer or behind their mic. And what happens is this gets rid of all that ambient noise and gets rid of a lot of the echoes that you might have. Now, if you want to kind of open up the option of getting a better mic, I've gone through a lot of mics over the years. If you're going to invest in like a $20 mic, it almost doesn't even make sense, because probably the one that's built into your computer is better than that $20 mic. So if the built-in mic's good enough, go for it. If you want a better mic, the one that I actually suggest using, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it here. It's not long enough, but I use the, it's a Yeti mic, and it's called Yeti Blue is the one that I use. But actually, no, Justin beat me to it. So the Blue Yeti one is the one that I have. As I mentioned, I've gone through a lot of different brands. That's the one that I find is the best out there. So again, if your school can get one of them and even you share it, they're not incredibly expensive yet. So Justin just mentioned it's there. Julie, it looks like you use one as well. Great. It's a great recording option for higher quality videos. Julie also mentioned Audacity. That's another free editing tool that's web-based. Again, if you wanted to make higher quality, I would say Audacity is probably closer to like a Camtasia Studio. It's got a lot of features there, and again, it's open source, so it is free. Okay, so the next thing is lighting, and there's a few different things you can do with lighting, but what I actually recommend is if you have existing lighting in your house or in your classroom, as long as you have one coming from kind of like one angle and one coming from the left, then it will reduce a lot of those shadows. If you want to get a higher quality light, a lot of people use ring lights now, and ring lights aren't incredibly expensive, right? So I have one over here on the right side. I think I got it on Amazon again for maybe $40. So again, if your school has any funds for video equipment, especially stuff that you can share. You know, when I was social studies teaching, we didn't have something for every teacher, but we had a set of this equipment. So we had a good mic, we had a good lighting equipment, and we would just share it because you're not making videos all day, every day necessarily. You just need it for a particular space. So that would be my recommendation on that. All right, so last thing is if your school does get an opportunity to get a nicer camera, the one that I recommend one second. So the one that I recommend is actually a Canon. It looks like this. It's a Canon M50. This is kind of like if you want to make really high quality videos. Gail, you beat me to it. Oh, it's probably because it's on my spec sheet. So this is the Canon. It takes good pictures. It takes good video. And then also, if you want nice mics for a camera like this, get a Rode mic. Rode is like the brand that I highly recommend. They make two different types. They make one's called a shotgun mic. It looks just like this. You just plug this into the little analog port on the Canon. The other thing you can get is Rode also makes lapel mics. So you can just kind of put the lapel mic on, connect it to your camera, and again, you get really, really high quality audio. So again, the recommendation for that top tier video creation would be the Canon with the Rode mic. And then if you're looking for kind of like a better type of setup for your camera to be on a stand, there are these things called Jobies, J-O-B-Y. If you guys have seen these before, but they're actually pretty nice. It's kind of like a standard tripod, but they're smaller, so you can just put them right on your desk. And they're a little bit, I don't know, say flexible, so you kind of move them in different ways. But all of those are really good equipment that you can get. If you have a library media specialist that can get some of this equipment, or just to have in your school, I think all of those are really good options. All right, so I run through a bunch of things. At this point, again, I want to open it back up to you guys. Do you have any other tips on mics, videos, lighting equipment that you use that is helpful in your class? Okay, Julia, thank you for that recommendation. Actually, do you mind jumping in and sharing quickly with the group what that is? Not sure if your audience available.
It is a wireless microphone. You can get it for between $50 and $60 off of Amazon. Again, not top tier. but very functional, works great with especially our Chromebooks is what we've discovered, so that we can have folks a little further back. It will also just work with your phone as well, but it has the little battery packs. Everything's rechargeable. Like I said, it's an easy one to use. We've been really, I've actually used them for years. They work really well if you have folks who record outdoors and you get a lot of wind noise. It has a little wind guard already with it. So, because that's the one thing you won't be able to edit out, even with Audacity, is a lot of wind noise. But it's, like I said, for the cost, it's great.
Excellent recommendation. And you said it does have a wind guard on it?
Yes, it does. And
Yeah.
I've had a lot of PE teachers use it to create instructional videos outdoors, and it does a great job.
Excellent tip. Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that too, because you're right. A lot of times if you are outside, if you're filming like a field trip or if you're doing anything outside, that wind noise can get kind of crazy. So what she's mentioning too is if you're not sure what we mean by wind guard, like this is kind of like a built-in wind guard on a road, but they're kind of big fluffy things that you'll see on mics, but definitely helps reduce some of that noise. Excellent. Thank you for that recommendation. Also, I know I did cover a lot of equipment towards the end there, Gail. Thanks for putting some of those into the chat. If you want to kind of get the specs on it at all, or have me send over links to them in case you did want to order any of this stuff, just shoot me a quick email and then I'll get back to you and I can share out that list of the equipment that I use in my space, and I can share that with you guys. So we're at the tail end here. So just really quick before we wrap up, again, my email is Driscoll@EdTechTeacher, in case you guys did want to get some of those specs on the equipment, or anything else you guys want to reach out for that matter. We do have other sessions coming up. So on August 23rd, there's going to be a building assessment with Google Workspace session and a student reflection and digital portfolio session. The link to register is up top. Put that in here in the chat. And then also there's a session feedback form. So if you guys could give us some feedback on how this went, we would really appreciate your thoughts on that. So that last link is to our session feedback form. We do have the video archive, so we're going to be sharing this out as well. So in case any of your colleagues didn't have a chance to catch us live, they can go and view this video there. And the slides, one more time, if you guys jumped in a little bit later to our session, the slides link is here in case you wanted to access any of these resources. I want to thank you guys so much for jumping in. It's top of the hour, so we're going to wrap things up. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'll stay on the line if anybody wants to stick around for a few minutes, ask any follow-up questions. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your summer, guys. Thank you.
Hi, Tom. May I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, it's Wendy. Hi.